Good morning. My name is Tim Chen. I'm the chair of the AID Board of Directors. Welcome to all of you. I really appreciate your coming. We have a brief presentation that will just kind of describe what our mission statement is. We have several of our board members attending as panelists so that they can respond to your questions at the end. Unfortunately, we have 10 members of the board as it is, but not all of them are free to attend something like this in the middle of the day. Some of them have to, well, they have 9-to-5 jobs and they have to go do them. And then also we're joined by Deborah Cruz, who is our program manager, who's probably has more of the details about what we do and can really answer some of these questions. A couple of sort of housekeeping. We will record this session and we will post a link to the session on our website. So in case you want to go back and look at it, you can do so at your leisure. The Board of Directors is governed by the bylaws of Advocates for Immigrants in Detention Northwest. We have the potential of having 11 members. Right now we have 10. Of that, actually the majority were elected in 2019. Each of us serves for 2 years with the possibility, if we're willing to be nominated again, serving for an additional 2 years. We're limited to 2 terms. So as you can tell, if a lot of us were nominated in 2019, this is kind of a year where we hopefully won't have a significant turnover, but we'll see. I can give you my personal opinion. I think we're a very compatible board. Personally, I believe that anything that we do or anything that we have requires a vote, I prefer that it's unanimous. If we have a decision which is not, my preference is to table it. And in fact, this has worked very well for the last year and a half, 18 months. We have started putting together a mission statement for AID Northwest. We do that at the beginning of every year. We have a board retreat in January. That mission statement is what guides the organization for the coming year, and it'll be revised from year to year. And that's what I intend to discuss a little bit. I put together a little PowerPoint presentation. At the end, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions or seek responses from the various board members or Deborah. Please use the chat. We're all learning here, so please give us a little flexibility. So there's a chat at the bottom, I think, and there should be a Q&A. If you could enter it, one of us will try to respond to that question, and we will do so. Hopefully we will be able to give you some additional information. With that, I think we will begin. The Advocates for Immigrant Detention, as I mentioned, is a maximum membership of 11 individuals. Right now we have 10. One was just recently nominated last board meeting, and we have the potential of another one. Our treasurer, Cynthia Hammer, will be graduating from her 2nd term, and so we have potential 1 and perhaps 2 individuals, assuming that the ones that were elected in 2019 will continue to serve. So we have a reasonable prospect of a turnover this year. I won't go over this in detail, but as most of you are aware, our basic mission started out to assist the folks that were housed in the Northwest ICE Processing Center in the Tacoma Tide Flats. We operate a welcome center, new RV down there for the folks that are released. We help them with on to their next stage of their journey to wherever they're going to be. We have a hospitality house where they can stay for some period of time. And we have a visitation program for those folks that are in detention that just would like to have somebody to talk to. We used to actually have a visitation in person. That, of course, is no longer possible, but we'll continue to do that work. I do want to emphasize that immigration is a very complex legal issue, and this is not something that we just deal with these people as individuals. So we don't attempt to differentiate. And we're starting to expand more to collaborate with other organizations that deal with different parts of the whole immigration issue. We have, in general, did I skip? Sorry, we're having little operational errors here. We in general do closely cooperate with, primarily with World Relief. They provide assistance to folks that are granted asylum with resettlement and finding occupations. We also work with Northwest Immigrant Rights Project. They're the folks that provide legal representation to detainees in the detention center. And just recently, we've expanded our collaboration with the Tacoma Community House. We attempt to provide a very conflict-free relationship with GEO and with the ICE. A lot of what we do really depends upon working closely with those individuals. Our preference is that, just as a principle, that the detention center, if it has to exist, which I don't see anything changing very soon, remain in a metropolitan area. If you can imagine that, even as bad as what we have now, can you imagine coming out of the detention center in the Tacoma Tide Flats? If we weren't there, what do you do? There's no public access to anything. There's no transportation. There's no public phones. And so you're right out there along the railroad tracks. And so, I mean, what do you do? So you're not familiar with the area. You were picked up in the southern part of the U.S. and suddenly you're in Tacoma, Washington, and you have no idea where that is in this country. Can you imagine if you were in the middle of West Texas? Now suddenly you're out, I don't know if any of you have been in West Texas, but there's not a lot there other than oil rigs. So our preference is that it remains in some metropolitan area where in fact there are services which can help these. And we do want to emphasize that of all of us who volunteer, and the board is an all volunteer group of individuals, we all get much more than we actually receive. The board probably volunteers total between all of us, maybe approximately 200 hours every month. So it's a fairly extensive investment, volunteer investment on our part. These are the names of the board of directors. You'll notice their board of directors is actually composed of a lot of individuals. Some of them are much younger. There's one student, but you have to understand, for me, my youngest daughter is 40. So anybody in the 40s or 50s is young. Below that. Anyway, so we have some very young people. We have several of us who have worked for large corporations. Several of us have run our own business. We have a couple of lawyers, you know, it's just a wide variety of individuals, few educators. So it's, we represent a wide variety of experiences on the board. The board has 4 operating committees. Each board member is assigned to a particular committee, is expected to participate. Communications, marketing, that's fairly obvious. These are the folks that do the website, social media, newsletter, those kind of communications, and to a certain extent includes this community meeting. Finance, they hire, due to the financial reporting, establishment of policies and procedures. Fundraising, that's pretty obvious. These are folks that write the grants, do the fundraising activities. Because of COVID, we've had to, the last in-person fundraising event was in 2019. We've now transitioned to everything being online. Our 2 major activities would be the Give Big Washington in the spring and the Giving Tuesday in the fall. All of it online. And then governance, which is probably the most important, keeps us in line, develops the policies for which we operate. And as an example, I have posted the latest policy, which we adopted at the last meeting, which is the internet and social media publicity and promotion. We were concerned about protecting the privacy of the detainees and the volunteers. And this is a policy which was adopted. Sorry. I'm sure all of you are aware of the various programs we have, the visitation programs. Clearly, because we cannot actually go into the detention center anymore, those volunteers have been sending cards and letters to the individuals. We've also provided art supplies. I'm sure many of you have seen the various, I guess, art projects that were prepared in the past from candy wrappers. It's pretty ingenious. Well, we've provided them some legitimate, more different art supplies. Telephone communication is probably our biggest, most popular program. Without telephone credit, they can't call. The detainees can't call. And so we work with the Northwest Immigrants' Rights Project. They actually are the ones going in, representing people. The other thing is that because we now do the visitation through cards and letters, we've had a lot more requests for the telephone communications credit. And so we as a board are discussing how we can expand that particular program. Something that we started recently was we actually provide a duffel bag full of clothing and items for those that are being deported. Those of you who may have worked at the Welcome Center realize that people go into the detention center with what they were wearing at the time. So that if an individual crossed the Texas border in summer, they were wearing shorts, t-shirt, and tennis shoes. If you were deported in the middle of the winter, you don't have anything. And so what we have done is when we have received a call to the hotline, we actually put together a bag of clothes appropriate for the season. Welcome Center, I'm sure all of you have seen the picture of the brand new RV that we were able to acquire last year. I give you 2 statistics at the bottom. 2019, huge number of immigrants were released. 2020 is much smaller, and the number of countries has also decreased. It's a variety of things. Immigration policies, COVID-19. The detention center, we've been told, has capacity for 1,500 individuals, and right now they're probably around 300. So because of the COVID, it is really significantly decreased. Hospitality House, we had to close it for a while. We have opened it back up for individuals that have a negative COVID-19. We currently have 3 residents. Right now, we're not, we're allowing them to stay whatever is necessary. And if you would like to know more, Deborah can talk at the end and tell you a little bit more about who's staying in the house and what their background, just a little bit of information. A recent project that was initiated by the board late last year was to provide financial assistance to immigrant families in the area with rental assistance. We are collaborating with the Tacoma Community House to identify clients. They have all of the case management folks and process and procedures. So it's just, made much more sense to leverage on their capabilities. They identified 2 families in the area. One is from Venezuela, the other is from Peru. And we have provided assistance to them. We will, this last board meeting, we agreed to provide an additional 3 months of assistance. And we're in the process now of making that happen. As far as outreach to the community, we have a speakers bureau, which upon request will provide presentations talking about AID Northwest. We have a group of volunteers that help the immigrants that have been released with transportation. And then, of course, the community meetings. We have under discussion a variety of things that we consider for expansion in the future. One of them is to expand the telephone access. You know, it's once became apparent to the detainees that there was a possibility of having telephone access credit. Of course, we have a lot of people asking for it, and the board agreed to, we have a certain budgeted amount. We agreed that we would inform NERP that go ahead and spend it. Don't budget it by month, and if you run out, we'll see about refreshing that fund. There are a lot of agencies that work on refugees and immigration in the area. We would like to collaborate a little bit more with them, and we'll see about that. And then, of course, we have a working relationship with World Relief, Tacoma Community House, and there are others that we can look at. Okay, I'll throw it open to questions. I don't know, maybe Deborah, you could tell everybody a little bit about who's staying in the house, just a brief background.
Sure. Hello, everybody. So we currently have 3 people staying in the house. One of them, I won't say their full names, but Juan is from Chile. He is currently working on getting his work permit. He's connected with World Relief, and his attorney is also working on some paperwork for him. We have connected him with resources, EBT card, ORCA card, and helping him get to his appointments through our PDAM program. Another thing that we have established is buddy program. So one volunteer is assigned to each person staying in the house, and so they can help them with, say they're taking English classes, help them make sure that they're doing well in those classes, and help reach out to the caseworkers at World Relief if they have questions that they don't understand. Let's see, the second person is Grace, and I don't know if all of you have read our newsletter, but she she won her she passed her CNA test, and so she's actually working at a place in Tacoma, And she's also currently working on moving to Seattle, where she'll have a lot more opportunities with some bigger facilities. And she wants to continue on her training for to become an LPN and then go as far as she possibly can. And then we have Leo, who's from Nigeria. Grace is also from Nigeria. He stayed with us in the past, moved to the East Coast and was working over there, lost his
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you, Deborah.
Okay, so he is staying with us now, and we've connected him with World Relief, and he is currently in a job class, and they're helping him find employment. He speaks perfect English, so that's a good thing. And then we still have Nixon, our hospitality house coordinator, living there, so he helps them out whenever they need assistance in the evenings, and he helps the Welcome Center when they bring people to the house to wait for rides from their families and things like that. So the program is working really well. I'm really glad to be able to help these people for a longer term. You know, in the past, we only had people in there for 30 days, so it was, you know, they were in and they were out. We didn't really see how they succeeded and things like that. So anyways, thank you all for your support, because without you, we wouldn't be able to take care of them.
We have a call in, I guess, from Vivian. I'm not sure how this works, but Vivian, I guess can you ask your question? Is anybody here?
Taylor,
Go ahead, Vivian.
do you want me to mention? It seems to me that non-documentation is one reason why people end up in detention. And I see there's a very amazing group of organizations that you're connected with. Do they help with documentation so that this doesn't happen again with someone?
This is,
Cynthia, go ahead.
I'll say what I know. We're trying to help an undocumented family in Tacoma by helping with rental assistance. So when I was talking with Tacoma Community House yesterday, she explained that these undocumented people, no matter what happens, they can't get documented. If you come into the US and don't ask, you come in somehow and didn't get into detention, and you stay here for over a year without asking for asylum, you've missed that opportunity. And then the rest of the time you're in the US, you're undocumented. So I don't know for what the history is of the people that are undocumented, but I think many of them are in this situation. They won't, unless laws change, they wouldn't be able to become documented.
Tanya, go ahead.
So NERP does assist with people that were in detention because there's a multitude of reasons as to why you may have been detained, whether it's because you didn't have proper documentation, whether your visa expired, and immigration is extremely complex. So NERP will assist those undocumented individuals with a pathway if they have an available pathway. I know Tacoma, my understanding, I'm not very familiar with Tacoma Community House, but my understanding is they will also try to help, you know, get them to a legal representative that can actually provide them with the guidance that they need.
Bill, do you want to say something?
As for undocumented people, the reason they stay undocumented is you can get documented even though you came in via the coyote or however. But the process is you go back to Mexico and wait 10 years. So that's why they choose to remain undocumented.
Tanya, go ahead.
Can I just go again? Every situation, it depends on how they came in, and it's very fact intensive to that individual. When you start looking at immigration and you're like, wait, it doesn't apply the same to every individual. That's true, because unfortunately it's how did you come in? Who's here? How many siblings do you have? Where's your family? There are so many different factors. That's why an organization such as NERP, attorneys are trained to look at those things and actually, figure out, is there a pathway for them? And yes, there is a bar, and that's kind of what Bill was alluding to, is if you've been in the United States unlawfully for a certain amount of time, there is a bar, but there are waivers. Again, it's extremely fact intensive. So, I would leave that up to an actual immigration attorney.
There is a question that was raised about the housing assistance, if these were formerly held at the detention center. The fact is, I don't know. We don't know. All we know is that there are immigrants in the area, undocumented, and that they essentially lost their job because of COVID-19. And so we have, through Tacoma Community House, they have a case manager with a Tacoma Community House who identified to us as the folks that could use some rental assistance at this point in time. There are many families. We being Tacoma Community House with them, chose 2 families to assist in this moment. This may be an opportunity to expand. This is something the board will have to look at in the future. Tanya?
Martha Scoville had a question that she put into the chat about, there's an unwritten understanding among AID Northwest volunteers emphasized in training sessions and presentations to the public that AID Northwest is neutral and does not take actions that would affect the relationship with ICE and GEO. Could you clarify how neutrality benefits immigrants in detention? And what are we expected to do when we become aware of problems or issues in the detention center in our work as AID Northwest volunteers?
That's a darn good question. I'm not sure I have a very good answer. Martha knows that the Welcome Center RV parked outside the detention center is highly dependent upon, frankly, ICE allowing it to be there. In the early days, some of you may not remember, but we had to move it every weekend because of the Tacoma Police Department regulations that it can't be parked there forever. So because ICE and GEO have allowed it to happen, we can leave it there, and that works well for us. I don't have a good answer, and that is something that we will have to consider as far as, if we see conditions in the detention, and many of us are aware that, for example, the detainees are paid essentially nothing for doing work. Whether that's right or wrong, we will probably have to, it is something we have to look at carefully to determine what we could possibly do and how we can make their situation better. I'm not sure, does anybody else on the board have any further thoughts on that?
Well, this is something I'm just thinking of now, but we could try to get another group at a church or something to be ones that would go in. And what I'm reading online is that you can go in and ask questions and do an inspection and bring your concerns to the public. I just think it's not going to work well for AID Northwest to do that, but maybe we could encourage another group to be doing that.
Patty?
Yeah, well, one thought is through this just initiated ad hoc advocacy committee that a simple report system be started. We used to, and I'm a visitation volunteer, when I was going into the prison to meet with someone, we would all write a report online, and I read them avidly. And perhaps we could do a very confidential, using just initials, report that the board would see at some point, from which we could decide maybe who, as Cynthia is saying, or what other organizations we might work with for advocacy and changing those situations. But it seems like getting the data first is kind of in limbo right now, through no one's fault, because of COVID. Writing letters is not the same as visiting and having contemporary or what's the word, the legal word, extemporaneous conversations, where people really tell you there's metal in the food, there's this, there's that, I got shoved against the telephone and I have a scar on my head to show it. Those kind of things. Now, I'm not saying Aid Northwest could jump in and fix those things, but perhaps with the new advocacy ad hoc committee, we could at least know about them as board members and see if through outreach to other organizations regionally, we might be able to help solve some of these issues. That's just a thought. It starts with a report though. You got to have some data, and we're kind of in limbo on that right now. Does anybody have any thoughts on that? And anybody who wrote in also?
I think one thing that you said, Patty, is maybe if we became part of a larger group, we could do it and not have the onus be just on our organization. We'd be one of 10 bringing this to ICE.
And with a little more impact as well.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yes, I was just going to say, I think one thing the ad hoc committee could consider is developing a set of almost what I would call universal principles for the treatment of detained people, or for pre-detention activity, such as being paid a fair amount for work that's done during detention, such as receiving healthy meals, which apparently isn't always the case from what we understand in that facility. For not placing in detention nonviolent people who are there because they have been picked up for very minor nonviolent transgressions. So I think that there is a way that we could come up with a set of principles that we support, and that would possibly be part of the basic AID Northwest mission.
Cynthia, go ahead.
Yeah, what I understand is that the federal government already has guidelines on how these detention facilities should run, a lot of criteria. And even doing an inspection, you could see in what way aren't they meeting the guidelines.
Bill?
Somebody earlier mentioned that you can actually go in and inspect the prison as a layperson off of the street. Is that true?
Well, I just left this meeting to go find that out, and it's a process to become approved, but it's allowed. I think they said that throughout the country, there are 20 detention facilities where they have a visitor program. And I guess that's where one of those 20 groups, but it could have the expanded purpose of asking ICE about all these guidelines, and also asking the detainees about the guidelines. So it ties in with what Patty said, is starting to collect information.
Bill?
So this begs the question. ICE is not in control of that prison. GEO is, and they are not following the guidelines. How do we hold GEO accountable? So you can go in with an inspection with the process. The process includes letting them know you're coming. Big deal.
Okay, let's get back to the questions. I have in the chat session, how are we assuring that our volunteers and detained people released are COVID-free? In addition to letter writing, some volunteers establish phone video contacts. I thought that we keep that pretty anonymous. Is that right? Who knows about the visitation, letter writing? Bill,
We've been writing letters to some ladies in the prison.
they have
And,
your contact information?
do they have my contact? No.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay.
No. It goes through the house, the hospitality house.
Right. Okay. As far as COVID-19, we actually, if they stay at the hospital house, we have them tested. We pay for the testing. If they do have COVID, which we're sure that they should not upon being released, we actually put them up in a hotel. Deborah, you want to say something?
Yeah, so, as far as ensuring that our volunteers and the detained people released are COVID-free, we don't have control of, making sure that they were tested inside the detention center. It's voluntary. So, they do test them if they will allow them to be tested, and they go through a medical process on the way out. If they have any signs, any symptoms, then they won't release them. But other than that, they're asking them if they want to be tested, and if they say no, then unfortunately they don't. So at the Welcome Center, we practice social distancing. We wear masks. We do a lot of sanitizing so that we're not getting too close to the people when they're released. People that are providing transportation are also given guidelines to clean, sanitize their cars before and after, and people have to wear masks when they're being transported. So that is the way that we're, ensuring that our people are staying safe, is just practicing all the guidelines that we've been given.
I'm sorry.
Does that answer your question, Diane? Okay, then we have another question from Diane about HB 1090. Currently at our state legislature states the following: all people confined in prisons and detention facilities in Washington deserve basic health care, nutrition, and safety. The bill needs wide support, good information of safety. So, yeah, we talked about that.
We discussed it at the board meeting. Tanya is our resident lawyer, and she has a very good answer.
So when we were looking at the House Bill 1090 regarding whether or not they can, whether a state can regulate a federal contract. So there is a question about whether or not intergovernmental, it's called the Intergovernmental Doctrine, basically where it says a state can't interfere with federal government powers. It is more than likely, they're going to find that it does, because even though GEO is a private group, it is at the bequest and with the contract with the federal government. So I don't know that it would be, I don't know how successful it would be in the long run. As far as an advocacy for it, I mean, it's definitely something that, I mean, we're opposed to others. So Martha, in response to how did California do it, they have enacted their law, but it hasn't been challenged yet. So you can create a law, a state can do something, but until the federal government decides to challenge it, and in California, that's their contract isn't up until, I believe it's 2028. So as of right now, there isn't a challenge for it. So, but if it is challenged, I think that they're going to bring up it's the Intergovernmental Doctrine, and they're going to say, no, you know, you're interfering with a federal government contract as a state, and you can't do it. There are lots of reasons, though, that, I mean, it's a good argument, and it does bring up a gray area of law, but that's what we understand about it and what we've discussed.
Okay, is there any more questions or something that somebody would like some feedback? I don't see anything else.
There are some questions in the chat section.
What do we got there?
Q&A, sorry. Q&A, there's Catherine Neal asked, I hope that most of you have read the UW School of Law report on detention center that was released in 2020. In the appendix, Missed Opportunities, they address the legal authority of state and local authorities to regulate NWDC. The governor's office and Pierce County Health Department have broad powers to require adherence to state law. Do you have any relationships with anyone from Pierce County Health Department? And do you think that that would be a good relationship to cultivate? Can we, as volunteers representing AID Northwest, talk to our state senators and reps about health conditions inside the facility?
Personally, I've not even thought about this, so I don't know. I'd have to think about that. I'm writing a note. Anybody else like to say something? Tanya, go ahead.
Okay, so in that, they actually talk about intergovernmental immunity and the fact that it was brought up before, and that the court struck it down, saying that it doesn't violate intergovernmental immunity, as well as they go on about health, you know, the health department is in charge of individuals' health within the state. Like I said, it hasn't been challenged up to this point, so it is an opportunity. I don't know how it'll end up, how the court's actually going to view it and how they would find for the individuals that are detained and whether or not the state actually can step in. But I think it's a great idea to try to advocate through the health department to get them to improve the conditions if that's something that somebody is willing to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think their ask is for AID Northwest to do the ask.
I think when it comes down to when we're, you know, as we've tried to remain apolitical, you know, we're not going to one side, you know, one side or the other. We're not in support of the immigration policies, but we're also not truly advocating against them. I don't know that we would want to ask, but that's definitely something that, you know, we could talk about as a board to make that decision as to whether, you know, how does the board feel as far as whether we would be willing to have the health department step in. As far as being an AID Northwest volunteer, until the board makes a decision, and whether that's something that's just discussed in our ad hoc committee on advocacy and then brought to the board. I wouldn't recommend doing it as an individual, as a volunteer, saying that you're doing it on behalf of AID Northwest. Sorry, that was a really clunky way of answering this question, because I was like, I don't want to say, yes, let's do it, but I also don't want to say, let's not. It's something that we can talk about at a later time and make that decision though.
Patty?
If I may, I think there's a lot of good ideas coming up in this idea of advocacy, and they should probably be refined. And, and recommendations given to the board from the ad hoc advocacy committee. Would that be a way to proceed? Because Tanya, I didn't know that really what the deal was with Pierce County Health Department. But if there's an avenue here, I really personally don't see any reason why Aid Northwest can't advocate for detainees that way. I don't believe that's rocking the boat in a bad way. I think it's in a good way to help the detainees be healthy. Health is a right. But I would say let's deal with that on that committee and then bring recommendations to the board for a vote. Would that work?
I believe that was the decision that we talked about in the last board meeting, that the ad hoc committee with representation from yourself and Bill Lloyd on that ad hoc committee would come back with recommendations to the board, and we would discuss it. This is, well, to quote again, this is a complex subject with a lot of ramifications, and I think it has to be well considered. Now, it's funny you should say this. I read a story in the New York Times this morning. Apparently the power outage recently forced one of the health facilities, several thousand of the vaccines, to make an urgent run somewhere in Texas to use it before it all goes bad. They lost their generator, refrigeration, and so on. And so that Houston, I don't know if anybody knows Houston, but it's a huge, anyway, the county jail, those folks in jail were the recipients of this vaccine because they were a concentration of folks with available health care that they'd get to quickly. So they got lucky. So that's off the subject, but the reality is that when you have a lot of folks together in very close quarters, it just takes one person to turn it from free to a pandemic, and I think that is something that is clearly a health issue, if you will. Okay, is there anything else? I don't see anything else in the Q&A or chat. Does anybody? Go ahead, Bill.
I just had an eye-opening revelation last night from one of the detainees that was released. And it just occurred to me, because he had been in prison for 6 years and then a year and a half at ICE, or here in Tacoma. And so I asked him, well, which was better, prison or ICE? And he said prison was far better. Wow. I guess they only get out of their cages 1 hour a day here at Northwest Detention Center. And the food.
May I just bring up one more thing to?
Go ahead. Yes.
Would there be interest in having a report from the visitors? Now they're just writing, but apparently there's some videos and chats going on. I wasn't aware of that, but on any particular issues that would just give us some data to know what's happening inside. It's really hard to know, and having been there and listened to everything, it's really hard to sit on your hands and do nothing. What about, can we just start some kind of reporting mechanism that could provide the issues to the board every month, and see where we go from there with the advocacy committee?
No, I definitely agree. I'm because of my training, I definitely believe in data. I'm stories leave me kind of queasy, but what I heard earlier was that one, the ad hoc committee for advocacy will come up with some recommendations. I presume one of them is to gather from all of our volunteers any data relating to this particular topic of the conditions. The visitation folks are a perfect venue. Folks that have been released can describe something, but we really need something in writing, which we can summarize, and even if it's only partial, we're obviously looking at a very small portion of the total population. But even that is better than, just, I heard this person say that and so on like that. You know how that works. We've all played the game where you stand in a circle, somebody says something, and see what comes out the other end. And if we can gather some data, that would be great. And so my note essentially says that I'm sorry, I was writing some notes. We'll leave it to the ad hoc committee to come up with some recommendations, and we'll discuss it at the board meeting, and we'll go from there. But I think gathering data would be a very important recommendation. Tanya?
Oops.
I included the link to the report that Catherine referenced regarding the missed opportunities with the University of Washington report that was put out for anybody who would actually like to look at it.
Okay. Okay, is there anything else?
Catherine had another question regarding the Pierce County Health Department says that vaccinations are the responsibility of ICE, and ICE says that vaccinations are responsibility of the state. Are we able to pressure ICE and the state to get people vaccinated at the facility? And I don't have an answer for that.
I don't either. We'll just have to let's see the recommendations and we'll go from there. Rather than shotgunning this, let's come up with a couple of things we can work on, and then go, proceed.
I did talk to ICE and asked them if they were going to be vaccinating, and they hadn't heard that they were doing any of that yet. But I know that Catherine had talked to some detainees that said that they had heard that they were going to be vaccinated. So I asked the ICE officer to let me know if they hear anything.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Let's see. I don't see any more in chat.
There is a question about help. It says, oh, this is from Cynthia. I think it would be helpful at this stage to get other groups involved. Does NERP and World Relief have anyone going into the facility at this time? I know that World Relief does not. NERP goes in. They have, but they do a lot of, Zoom calls and things like that with the detainees right now. So that's. I don't think they're allowing a lot of people in there because of COVID.
We're all busy trying to look at our screens, various screens. This is terrible. Oh, geez. Someday we'll all be able to get together again and somebody can just raise their hand. All right. I don't see anything else. Does anybody see anything else? All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Please remember that we'll do this again in April, and we intend to feature Patty Kilpatrick and I'm sorry, what's your partners in crime? Big, yeah.
Okay.
All right, Bill Fay. They were the ones that put together the chapbook of watercolors and poems. They'll talk about their experience with the refugees and folks in detention, and it should be a very interesting time. I've seen both. I've read some of Bill's poems, and for an engineer, he's quite good. Right.
Surprising.
Yeah, I'm an engineer also, so I could say that with a straight face. All right. Okay, thank you very much for attending. We'll look forward to doing this again in April. And maybe 2023 we'll all be used to Zoom. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Pax vobiscum.
Mhm.